I remember seeing the international legacy media's coverage of the 2006 Gaza and Lebanon wars. Israel had withdrawn from both territories, and international news media agencies and most foreign leaders had long made the argument that it was Israel's control of Gaza, South Lebanon, and the West Bank that was provoking violence. Israel was attacked without provocation from these two areas, proving that the conflict was not motivated by Israeli occupations, but rather from a desire to exterminate Israel itself. So, this presented a problem to Israel haters around the world. How could they justify continued hatred of Israel when Israel had ended two occupations that they were using to justify their hatred? How could they make Israel seem like the bad guy when Israel was attacked, completely unprovoked, from territory that Israel had just left? Their solution was to claim that Israel was being disproportionate in defending itself from rockets launched from territory that Israel had withdrawn from. I remember thinking, what kind of gaslighting bullshit is this? You spend decades insisting that it was Israel's occupations that was causing violence, and then when that gets proven wrong, you immediately try to shift the narrative to talking how excessive Israel's response to terrorist attacks is. The notion that these diplomats, officials, and media outlets were putting forth that Israel should tolerate constant rocket attacks against their towns because the only way to prevent them is to cause disproportionate harm to the aggressor's side is a notion so idiotic that only a college-educated Western liberal could believe it. This is by far not the only idiotic thing anti-Semites say to justify their hatred of Jews. There's, of course, the classic, Jews killed Jesus. This one makes absolutely no sense for several reasons. One, the Jews didn't kill Jesus, the Romans did. Two, Jesus himself was a Jew. Three, Jesus' death was supposed to happen to redeem humanity according to Christian beliefs. Four, Jesus came back, so no harm, no foul. 5, how could people today bear the guilt of a murder that happened 2,000 years ago? Of course, it made no sense, but despite the stupidity of the Jews killed Jesus myth, it still lasted for thousands of years and justified millions of dead. It was believed not only by illiterate peasants, but by keen scientific minds of the time. I am not the first person to notice just how dumb anti-Semites are, but what is even more astonishing is how some people can be legitimately intelligent about other things, but when the subject turns to Israel or Jewish people, it's there as if their IQ suddenly drops 30 points. More than anything, this is what leads me to conclude that a lot of people hostile to Israel are anti-Semitic, just how irrational and downright insane they become as they spew utter nonsense. Anti-Semitism has been observed to be many things: a hatred of association where Jews are associated with all manner of bad things by different people, a hatred that seems to constantly morph depending on the values of whatever society it's taking root in. But I want to focus on anti-Semitism as something else, as a form of psychological hypoxia. Hypoxia is a physical condition in which a person is deprived of oxygen. It is a serious risk for pilots, mountain climbers, deep-sea divers, and anyone who is going into low oxygen environments. Extensive research has been conducted on the effects of hypoxia. These include a loss of higher brain functions, especially reasoning, feelings of euphoria and nonchalance, memory loss, and loss of consciousness. To put it bluntly, when people become hypoxic, they become dumb and complacent. Research subjects have stated that when the oxygen level was turned down, they lost the ability to make logical decisions and that they stopped caring if they lived or died. And it was only once the oxygen was turned back up that they regained their logical reasoning. Anti-Semitism clearly has similar effects. Some people will wake up once they realize how dumb their beliefs are, but most anti-Semites simply can't be educated out of their stupor. It appears it is far easier to inoculate someone from anti-Semitism before they start believing in it than to wake them up from their Jew-hating stupor after they have been convinced or brainwashed. This is why the mainstream media delegitimizing Israel is so scary to the future of Jewish communities around the world. Once they convince the normies, those who can't find Israel on a map, that Israel is evil, it will be significantly more difficult to convince them otherwise, no matter how much evidence you present to them. This is why portraying the world's only Jewish state as the object of scorn and hatred will lead to an increase in hostility towards Jewish people more broadly. This is why it is so critical to not elevate voices that spread hatred of Israel or parlay in anti-Semitic beliefs. In my previous video, I discussed a standard to evaluate whether criticism of Israel or Jews is being done in good faith or is done to justify hatred of them. People like Candace Owens, Lauren Chin, Martyr Maid, or Tucker Carlson have been elevated by pro-Israel conservatives in the past because they have made good points on other issues. They have even made analyses that are downright brilliant from time to time. However, it needs to be understood that people who are hostile to Israel and paranoid about the Jews are suffering from a mental hypoxia that will manifest in them making idiotic or foolish statements. I am not saying that you can never ally with these people on any issue, but you need to be very careful about letting them associate with your political positions. The Daily Wire right now is reaping the negative consequences of having turned a blind eye to Candace Owens' anti-Semitic mental deficiencies, and now their brand has been tarnished by her increasingly idiotic public statements. Other right-wing commenters have become more friendly to authoritarians, white nationalists, and Vladimir Putin, while they have become more hostile towards Israel. Anti-Semitism must be understood as fundamentally a rejection of rational thought. Jew haters make all kinds of illogical decisions, like siding with jihadists who hate you, like diverting critical materials from the Eastern Front to keep the death camps running, like harming the relationship with the Middle East, most pro-American country, in a ridiculous attempt to curry favor with a regime dedicated to America's destruction, like murdering or expelling your entire merchant and financial class at the same time you're trying to establish a grand overseas empire. The list goes on and on. Anti-Semitism makes people stupid and irrational. Now, there is some very good news about this. That is that philo-Semitism versus anti-Semitism makes a good litmus test for if someone is going to stay grounded in a moral position and stay sane versus if they are going to go off the deep end. If you're ever afraid that you might be becoming too radical, ask yourself if you are starting to feel paranoid about the Jews, or if you're starting to blame Israel for the wars that jihadists start, not just against Israel, but against anyone. If you're wondering whether your criticisms of Israel or any Jewish person or organization is crossing the line, or if you are concerned about who you're associating with, ask the 3 questions concerning their opinions, the same 3 questions I put forth in my last video. The people who hate the Jewish people are always the bad guys, even if they sometimes are enemies of other bad guys.